ES Audio.
Hello and welcome to Lawrence Eladio's Rugby Podcast. I'm Sarra Elgan. I'm sitting in for Lawrence, who's away again in Spain this time though. He's taken on his charity cycle slam challenge, which is going pretty well, I think. Joining me to chat about all of the action from the weekend, I'm delighted to welcome back a man who knows a thing or two about rugby, having played for Leicester, England and the Lions. Ben Kay is here. And we have the captain of Harlequins women's team and former England centre, Rachael Burford. She's here as well. Rachel's also here representing the Evening Standard, as she's been writing a column for them during the Women's Six Nations campaign, which has been a massive success, which we will get on to a little later. And then from the Sail Fan podcast, the Shark Tank, it's James Madeley. A very warm welcome to you all. You all well?
Thank you. Very good. Thanks, Sarra. Yeah, very
good. Good to see you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be on.
Yeah, nice to have you on, James. Rachael, we'll get on to the Women's Six Nations in depth a little bit later, but you were over in France at the weekend. I saw the pictures on Instagram. That must have been a pretty special atmosphere there in the England-France game.
Yeah, I mean, as a player, having played in France, and I'm sure Ben would say the same, it's one of the best places to go and play. And it didn't disappoint. It was electric. Every single, I'd say probably 95% were all French. The England supporters, they literally had put them in the top left-hand corner of the stadium where you could see the parents. And that was it. That was the only English fans. Oh, you did have a couple dotted around, but other than that, the French did well to try and keep the English out, but the girls did brilliantly, keeping the crowd as silent as they could with what they did on the pitch.
Did you get involved in any of the celebrations after?
Do you know what? I was invited, but I declined because I just know how loose they're all going to get. And as you saw quite early on, they obviously headed back to their hotel to get changed and whatnot. And, you know, even before, it was still light, put it this way, and they're all jumping in the pool. They're all singing songs. They've got a few bevies going, and that was early. So I know that it went on into the depth of the night, but yeah, it's good. They need to let their head down and celebrate moments like that for sure.
Yeah, I've not been on a night out with you, unfortunately, Rachael. But talking about loose, I've been on plenty of nights out with Ben.
Oh, quiet. We go back to the hotel early as well, don't we, Sam?
Yeah, always. Do you remember, what are the big nights you remember in terms of celebrating trophies? I guess the World Cup would be up there, but...
Probably the biggest night, I'd say Paris 2001 after winning the European Cup with Leicester. That was pretty big. Well, it was, sort of wasn't a night, it was like a 3-day thing that just carried on.
I dread to think what you were like after 3 days of solid drinking.
The best bit of that was Dean Richards, who had been up all night drinking on the plane home, the old sleeping on tour, no sleeping on tour thing. And Austin managed to find a permanent marker. And while Dean was while he was not asleep on the plane on the way home, but resting his eyes, drew a spiky cannon on Dean's forehead. And then when we got back to East Midlands Airport, obviously all the local media were there, all the TV cameras there to welcome us back. And Dean got off with the trophy with this big black drawing on his forehead, completely oblivious to the fact that Austin had done it.
That is brilliant. And it could only have been Austin, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously.
Oh, yeah.
James, I'm not going to ask you about any nights out, but have you had a good bank holiday weekend?
It's been a great bank holiday weekend. Yeah, lots of good rugby to watch on telly as well. The grounds are firming up, aren't they? So it's some good rugby to watch, I think.
Yeah, it's getting exciting now, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, for us, there's probably slightly less to play for in the Premiership, but still, you know, looking ahead to next week against Racing as well. So it's still exciting time to be a Sail fan at this time of the year.
Okay, so we'll dive straight into it then, and we'll talk about the results of the weekend. Ben, Quins headed to Northampton on Friday with hopes, of course, of securing their play-up spot. Saints had other ideas. They beat the champs by just 1 point. As a fan, as a neutral, I genuinely didn't want that game to end. It was class, wasn't it?
It was staggering. I don't think the Northampton fans wanted the first half to end because they were running absolute riot. You know, their back line just looks supreme when they're flowing and there's a bit of space on the field. And then what a job by Harlequins to come back and slightly controversial last penalty that
Yeah, you
Paul
said
Grayson.
that on the night, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, James Grayson, keep calling him Paul. I wonder where that comes from. James Grayson had to stand up and kick it from 49 meters or whatever it was. So it still took some doing. But I've looked at it again since, and I just think, it's one of those that it happens any other time in the game and no one really notices it. But the Harlequins fans are fuming because Luke Wallace did, for me, come in and affect a legitimate turnover, but he got penalised for being part of the tackle. But it just had a bit of everything that game. Some of the tries and some of the skill levels, the offloads were just awesome. And if we can have that every week, please, that'd be great.
That would be great. But this same side, James, they have got a bit of Jekyll and Hyde about them this season, haven't they? As opposition fans, I guess you just never quite know what you're going to get.
Well, we've always thought that it's if Dan Biggar's playing or he's not playing. That's what we talk about quite a lot. We think Dan Biggar's made such a big difference to the Saints because he's just a winner. So the way he drives the team, I think, off the pitch, even in warm-ups and things like that. But obviously they're without Dan this Friday night, and James Grayson stood up. He's had a difficult year because George Furbank has been getting preferred at 10, which is never easy when you're a specialist in the position. But I thought he was on it all night, and then to step up and hit that penalty right at the end, from quite a way out. Okay, it was relatively in front, but and the other thing I think that was so fantastic is to see the Gardens absolutely pumping again, because obviously I was watching it on TV, but it did sound like it was absolutely rocking. And I think that they're a difficult team to beat when the crowd are getting behind them as much as they were.
Yeah, because I guess at the Gardens, they've not been amazing at home this season, have they, Ben? But they're now in a really good position in the top four.
Yeah, just a little bit inconsistent, but to take James's point, that the noise when that final, probably when that penalty was given that I was talking about, but then when the kick went over, I don't think I've ever heard it as loud at the Gardens, and so that's not just being disparaging. It was just another level to what you usually get, and going into probably even last week, I was thinking, looking at the run-ins, I reckon Gloucester might have the slightly easier run-in, but to win that and get the 5 points puts all the pressure. Put all the pressure back on Gloucester. They obviously answered that, but I think now Northampton do have the easier run-in, particularly with Newcastle coming up at the end. But it's so tight. But Saints have put themselves right into that sort of favourite spot, I think, to get the 4th place.
Quins are obviously comfortable in 3rd, but they could have officially booked their place, couldn't they, in the top 4 on Friday night. Where are the reigning champs in the run-in now? Where are they in the defence of their title? Benny, they looking good?
Yeah, they are, because on any given day they can beat anyone, and whatever happens in a game, as we saw on Friday night, and a lot of the Quins fans will be saying, well, if the referee had made the right decision at the end, we would have won it. They can be dead and buried by the looks of it and come back and still win the game. So no one will really want to play them. If it does come down to Northampton, it'd be a pretty interesting set of semi-finals with potentially East Midlands derby and a London derby. So I'm sure Gloucester will have something to say about that. But I think Saracens and Leicester, they'll be slightly nervy about playing Harlequins, I think.
Okay, let's move on then, shall we? Let's move on to Sale Newcastle. And James, were you at the AJ Bell on Friday? Oh, did you watch it on TV?
I wasn't. I didn't make it on Friday, unfortunately. But one of the 3 lads on the podcast did. Alex, he's a season ticket holder there, and I always get the full report from him. But I obviously watched the full game back. I think it was kind of like literally a game of 2 halves for Sale. I think in the first half, our mind was kind of on next week against Racing. And then the second half, I think, there'd clearly been some words said at half time. I think Alex Anderson's taken a very different approach to Steve Diamond, more generally at Sale Sharks. But I think there might have been more of a Steve Diamond moment at half time, because they came out looking like a completely different team in the second half. And I mean, don't get me wrong, Newcastle are in a terrible run of form and played like it. But we up the tempo, we up the physicality, and usually with those two things for sale, if we can win those collisions, then we're in a good place. And Rob Dupree kicked his goals, and that was pretty much the story of it.
Yeah, Ben James mentioned there about, obviously Sale have got Racing next weekend in Europe. And you do assume that would have to be at the back of their minds, right? Even for a professional rugby player, professional coach, a big match like that has to be there somewhere.
I think we all know that they were pretty clearly out of the top 4 contention in everything but maths, I think. But 100%, you look at the team that was picked, it was about making sure that everyone was battle hardened for the week before. They could have rested a few other bodies, but you don't want to do that. You don't want to go in off the back of a week off to such an important game. And although it wasn't the ideal, everything flowing and brilliant, they found a solution to their problems. And it's much better to go out and have a better second half than the first half than the other way around when you're trying to build towards something the following week. So I'm very fortunately going to be there at the Leicester Arena. Yeah. So I cannot wait for that. And I'd like nothing more than Sale to go over and upset the party that's obviously going to happen in that arena.
Yeah, really looking forward to that next weekend. So Newcastle, a quick word on them then. They're 11th, 33 points, I think, 4 away from Bath at the bottom. Dean Richards is stepping down from his role at the end of the season. James, in what sort of place does he leave the club when he goes?
Well, I think he's done brilliant things for Newcastle. I think he should be hugely celebrated. And he stayed loyal to them when they've been relegated as well. I think there's a sense that he's taken them, he's completed that journey now. They've got a couple of, good young coaches up there, Walder, etc. So I don't know what's happening in terms of taking them over, but they've had a difficult second half of the season. There's no question about it. Without George McGuigan's sort of try-scoring brilliance, I really would be even more worried for them. And you consider how poor Bath has been this year, and yet Newcastle still would have been, mired in a relegation battle. So I think they do need some fresh energy and a fresh purpose, and hopefully we can see them back to their best next season.
I don't know if I'm making this up. Did I read that Mark Wilson might be going back there, coming out of retirement as a coach? Have I genuinely made that up? Have you guys read that somewhere?
I haven't read it anywhere, no.
I think you made it up. I think you made it up.
I read that somewhere.
I did hear rumours pretty soon after he retired that might not be the end of it, but you don't know.
Okay. Okay. I don't think I dreamt it. I'm sure I read it somewhere.
The thing about Newcastle, limited budget over the last few years. They've done fantastically well to cement that place, but their style of play, they've got a few good big ball carriers in there, but they just don't get over the gain line enough to be able to, a Dave Walder type game plan that's people running onto the ball at the pace that they never get that initial carry that gets them onto the front foot enough. And so many times we've watched them and they go phase after phase without really going anywhere. We don't know who's going to come in, whether anyone new will come in, but they just need to find a different way of doing things, I think. And there are plenty of teams around the Premiership, albeit some of them with bigger budgets, that have been able to do that and have been able to reinvent their style of play and have benefited from it. But I think, Newcastle, if they want to get back up to, where they were a couple of seasons ago when they had some unbelievable talented players who could, with the X factor that could create things out of nothing, they need to slightly change their approach to how they're playing.
Right. Gloucester Bath, West Country derby. Saturday provided plenty of entertainment for rugby fans, although not if you are a Bath fan, Ben. How do Bath supporters keep the faith when they have been faced with that kind of defeat this weekend?
Well, look, there's obviously the big elephant in the room that there's no relegation. There's a lot of people. I personally want relegation, but I can also see that there's a lot of people that have been desperate for a performance like this so they can hang it on the fact that there's no relegation. When actually you look back over the years and there's been quite a few stuffings at the end of the season of lower down teams when there has been relegation. So I don't think it's necessarily to that. I just think the wheels have fallen off at Bath completely, and everyone is just waiting to see what happens next year. And not consciously, but subconsciously, that has affected the players, and they're running around like individuals. And you've only got to be 5% off, and you can be torn apart like that. The confidence isn't there. There's hesitation. Clearly, there's no direction. Now, to be fair to Stuart Hooper, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know, whether he's still fully in charge, whether sort of, a little bit of other people. Sometimes when things start to fall apart, other people can sort of take on other leadership roles and things. So we just don't know, but it is just really sad to see. And I've been in a similar situation with Leicester over the last few years, where a great club, still with some fantastic players on board, and you look at some of those players that are on the pitch for Bath, world class in their prime international players, and they put in a performance like that. So the season just can't finish quickly enough. And Johan van Graam, although people are saying, oh, he'll be looking and saying, what have I done? I think he will look at that as an opportunity to come in and immediately shift the dial. And if you look at how all the teams that have recovered from, a significant fall off a cliff of performance, they've all done it by simplifying things. And the most important thing a coach can do is just give absolute clarity of message for how we're going to play, keep it really simple, and then put the building blocks on top of that.
Yeah, James Ben touched upon it there. 64 points with no response, right? But 64 points with no response, when you look at the quality of players that Bath had out on that pitch on Saturday, are you just scratching your head a little bit? Well, as much as we
I'm a bit livid for Bath fans, really. I mean, I think the first thing that Bath should do is work out who attended the game and refund them the money, basically. I know it was at Gloucester, but that's what I'd be looking to do. Because I just think, and then you can't pin this on Stuart Hooper. I mean, the players have run out on that pitch as professionals. And I've seen Sale go away to Northampton. We've all had the odd shocker and you get battered. But you don't get 64-0 and don't respond with absolutely anything. And I'd be terribly embarrassed, to be honest. And if I was a Bath fan, I'd be pretty angry. I think there's a job to do. It's a West Country derby as well.
What's staggering, Sarra, is that despite how they've played this season, they're still packing out the wreck, and it just shows how loyal their fans are and how desperate they are to see things turned around. So, whenever performance drops, every team worries about what effect it's going to have on their crowd numbers, partly from a financial perspective, but partly because they know how important it is for their fans to stay behind them to get back to where they want to be. And I think the Bath fans deserve a lot of credit for that.
They were angry though on Saturday afternoon. I was interviewing Neil Hatley at the end of the game, and a few, I don't know if it came out on air, but if there were a few Bath fans, really shouting angrily at Neil and the coaching staff while we were being interviewed. I guess they just want this season to be done now, right? Coaches and players.
The only way is up for next season. I mean, if I was Van Graam coming in, I'd be like, oh, that's not too bad, actually, because it doesn't matter what you do now. You're going to be better than 64-0 away at Gloucester next year, bet you. Okay,
let's talk a positive Gloucester-wise then, because they were brilliant in attack and they were brilliant in defence. And there were we, Benny, pre-match, kind of going, oh, are they having a bit of a wobble ahead of the playoffs? They kind of proved us wrong, right?
Yeah, they did, and it was nice to see, again, with the caveat of how the opposition were playing. It was nice to see a bit of an all-court game, and you look at the different areas that the try scorers came from. Reece Zammit, who lights up any game with his pace. Good to see him getting back to where he was when he first broke onto the scene in the Premiership. I think their centre pairing are, the envy of a lot of teams in the Premiership. They've got the steel of Harris, but I think Harris has just been exceptional this season. Again, backing up what he did last year to get himself that recognition. So they're in a really good place, Gloucester. It's going to be fascinating how these last two games play out, because they would certainly grace the playoffs.
Leicester Bristol then, Tigers, they confirmed themselves a home semi-final with a win over Pat Lam's men at Welford Road. And also, Ben, it was just a really fitting farewell, wasn't it, to Tom Youngs? I mean, he got a great send-off from the fans for a player that's just, I don't know, he's just poured his heart and soul into that club. He's been a talisman and he's just a brilliant bloke.
I don't think anyone, I've never, ever heard any other Premiership rugby player or around the scene have a bad word to say about him. Even he's got into a few scraps on the pitch and things. Even afterwards, you'll see him having a good makeup with whoever he's just had a ding dong battle with. So, but I know personally that off the field, when things were the darkest that they've ever been at Leicester, he was literally the glue that was holding it from completely disintegrating. A brilliant link as a captain to the off-field side of the club. Just the most selfless rugby player I think I've ever met. And the fact that he did all that while he was under so much enormous personal strain because of the things that were happening at home. Just the measure of the guy. And I know coaches, Jordan Murphy in particular, Matt O'Connor, just couldn't believe how he was able to perform at the level he did with what was going on at home, and do all the extra bits that a captain has to do. And so for me, one of the biggest Leicester legends there ever has been. Maybe people won't remember that in 20 years' time because of the results at the time, but certainly anyone that played with him will.
Yeah, no, it was great to see him getting the send-off he deserves for sure. So he was the main story, if you like, pre-match. And I guess during the 80, James, the main story was Chris Ashton.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a try-scoring machine, and he's been out of practice for a little while, but out of a club for a little while. But when you've had the career that he has, across a number of different clubs now in England, but also when he was in France, he just knows his way to the try line. And now he's starting to start games for Leicester. He looks like he can just score every single game. He might have lost a yard of pace, but it's the way he reads the game. He's always been able to read the game incredibly well. The amount of line breaks that he finishes off is absolutely incredible, and it's fantastic to see a lad from the Northwest get the try scoring record.
Yeah, he's been amazing, isn't he? Fair play. Right. And Bristol, Ben, they would have headed there full of confidence after that Gloucester win last week. Pat Lam said they paid a price for individual errors. We've heard that quite a lot from them this season.
Yeah, again, it just shows the psychology of the sport. And I know they're missing people and missing sort of fairly big names, fairly big chunk of their budget in one player in particular. But, if you'd imagine saying a year ago that would have been the scoreline between these two teams, people would have looked at you like you were stupid. So Leicester, total confidence in what they're doing at the moment, and just felt easy for them, and Bristol, everything's hesitant as a result of that confidence, and that's all form is. Form is a hesitation that means that it doesn't necessarily result in an error, but the pass isn't quite out in front of a runner, so they have to check slightly, which means the cover have an extra fraction of a second to get over. And Bristol are a team, because of their style of play, that everything needs to flow with. And you look at how Quins and Saints played on Friday night, you saw the damage that can be done when your attacking game, which is wide, can flow, and Bristol have lost that flow at the moment. So again, another team that really are looking forward to the end of the season, but they've got quite a big job to do. They have lost a little bit of their sort of stardust, and it's going to be tough to get it back. And particularly now, they're a team that everyone this year has been gunning for, because they've always been the chasing team trying to get to the top, and they got to the top last year in terms of league position, and it's quite difficult to stay there.
Yes, absolutely right. Worcester Sarries then. Mark McCall was pleased with the win, and 6 tries, James, for them, and they're just pairing nicely, aren't they, with all the kind of big names coming to the fore at just the right time.
Yeah, I mean, they're unable to rotate the squad in the way that they used to. But you see that 23 that gets picked, and I go to Saracens quite a lot. It's actually my local club to where I live, and they're still absolutely fantastic. Such high quality. and actually the way that this game went has managed. They were able to do quite a lot of substitutions relatively early on. So, they're managing the squad through to the end of the season. And I think the thing with Saracens is it's almost like a muscle memory. Like, okay, they've been down in the Championship for a year, but now they're in the business end of the season. They know their way to a title, basically. So Ben, you mentioned about no one wants to play Quins. I actually think that Saracens would love to play Quins at Saracens. Let them play all of the rugby in the wrong parts of the pitch. And that's what Saracens do so well. They put the pressure back on the opposition. And, it seemed like Worcester, they just don't have the gears to cope with that.
And they've had a busy week, in fairness, haven't they? Wednesday, they booked themselves a Prem Cup final, Benny, which I'm sure they were delighted with. But Steve Diamond post-match, wasn't he? He wasn't happy.
No. But I think sort of he must have known what he was taking on a little bit, and just because someone walks in, it's suddenly not going to turn around and be brilliant. But maybe he's just setting the scene at the moment of what is acceptable on his watch and what isn't. And I get the impression that previously, the regime might have been sort of looking for the positives. Steve Diamond's not someone to do that. He'll show you what the negatives are and gently ask you to fix them for next week.
I'm not sure about the gently. Yeah, I know what you mean. Okay, last but certainly not least, London Irish Wasps. Wasps visited Renford Community Stadium on Sunday afternoon, and wow, what an afternoon it was. Another incredible comeback by Irish and another incredible draw. What's that now? Is that like 5, James, this season, I think, for Irish?
Yeah, and we've drawn a few at Sale. We've drawn 3, and I think 2 of those were against Irish. I could be wrong now. I'm probably going to get loads of mail now going, oh, why have you got this Sale fan? I doesn't know what he's talking about Sale. But that's my instinct. But it was, I just thought it was such an amazing game to watch. It was literally end to end. They were playing some fantastic rugby, both teams. And actually what I really enjoyed was a lot of young English talent on the pitch. And not just young English talent, but talent that could play for England, I think. Like the likes of Tom Pearson, Henry Arundel came off the bench. Tom Parton's got to be a pretty good player to nail down that 15 slot moving forwards. Great game to watch, flowing end-to-end rugby, loads of tries, exactly what you want at this time of the year.
Yeah, because that was going to be my question to you, Ben. Really, they have got these talented youngsters in Irish at the moment, which is absolutely brilliant. But what they have got this season as well is so much fight. Yeah,
I guess a little bit like Harlequins, that style of game that when it's tight and sort of, a bit of an arm wrestle, you don't always come out on the top. But as soon as the team pulls away, it just seems to happen that you can attack that. And it's really weird, the dynamics of the game. But they're another team that no one can go, oh, we've got 2 tries ahead, 2 converted tries ahead. Game's done now.
Yeah.
They just wish this season that, the Premiership was 85-minute games instead of 80, because I think they've had they won those 5 games, they'd be in 4th now. So they're the margins. You're completely out of it, but that's the difference between qualifying and to James's point, some brilliant talent on display. And Henry Arundel off the bench gets man of the match because he completely changed the game. I would be very, very surprised if he wasn't one of Eddie Jones's little project players in the summer. And he thought, right, let's just go and take this kid away and have a look at him. Not necessarily for now, but just make sure that he's under the England wing rather than anyone else's.
Disappointing though for Wasps. Lee Blackett said at the end of the game that it felt like a big loss, and you kind of understand what he meant by that, James, because it must have felt like a big loss.
I think when you're that far ahead in a game, you do expect to close it out. And so I think psychologically they might feel it like it was a loss. But like Sale, like Irish, a lot to play for going into the end of the season to make sure you qualify for the Champions Cup next year. It's really, really important for the clubs commercially and all sorts, for the players as well, to put themselves, on the biggest stage. So, we play Wasps next that's the next game for Sale in the Premiership. But it'll be a quick turnaround, I think, for us after the Racing game. So that's going to be almost like a cup final for that top 7 or 8.
And they're both in Europe next weekend, of course, as well, aren't they? Irish, Toulon, and Edinburgh Wasps go to, Ben? So
yeah, I think certainly think that Wasps could do the job up in Edinburgh. You know, there's no reason why not, and you know, I can see them bouncing back. Irish Toulon, that'll be bonkers. It'll be a cracker, won't it?
Yeah,
So,
I'm really looking forward to this weekend of European matches. Actually, like there's some that you can't really call so many of them, can you?
That's the great thing, though, isn't it, about European competition? And it's the different leagues. And, you know, you look at the top 14, Toulon's a really interesting one because they were sort of almost looking at relegation just before Christmas. And now they're not far off the top of the table. So both them and Irish taking a lot of form into that game. So I'll certainly be tuning in for that one.
And of course, the Gallagher Premiership rugby final will be taking place at Twickenham, the home of English rugby, on the 18th of June. So tickets are already selling very quickly. So make sure you get yours and join us for an afternoon of world-class rugby action, what promises to be an unmissable entertainment. More information is available online at eticketing.co.uk/Premiership Rugby. Okay, so time for us now to choose who you guys think was the outstanding player from the weekend. Rachael, let's start with you. I'm guessing it's going to have to be a Red Rose. Am I right?
Yeah, and I doubt any of you will argue with me on this one, but I think I can't look past Emily Scarrett because obviously of her journey with her legs, she came back into the Six Nations and she's quietly gone about her business, but this weekend had to lead the side out with Sarra Hunter getting injured. But she was just phenomenal. Her kicking boots were on, absolutely rocketing the conversions and the penalty, which kind of probably pushed France ahead. But there was a moment in the game where France they could have got back into it with a huge line break from Emily Boulard, and out of nowhere, Emily Scarrett comes across, does this incredible cover tackle 5 meters out from try line. And I think that was, for me, the moment of the match. And that's why I'm going to say Emily Scarrett.
Brilliant player, but also a brilliant person. Like how good a girl is she? She's great, isn't she?
Yeah, she's top class. And, you know, I wonder how her celebrations goes because she's normally quite quiet. But I think yesterday she was going to go for it. So I wonder how her head's still doing at the moment.
Yeah, not good, I wouldn't have thought, after the weekend. James, what about you?
Well, I think it's difficult to look too far beyond Chris Ashton's try scoring this weekend, you know, becoming the try scoring record, and it's been sitting there. He probably thought he wasn't going to get there at the beginning of the season, not finding a club, but I think that's been a very clever signing for Leicester, and I was pleased for him, even, you know, seeing as an ex-Sale player to get over the line and get the record. So good for him.
Yeah, he seems to be enjoying himself there, and they're enjoying having him seemingly as well. Benny?
It's a tough one for me because I want to pick someone from one of the best games I've seen in the Premiership, which was Harlequins against Saints on Friday night. It was just had absolutely everything. There was plenty of physicality. I'll tell you who I'm going to go for. And actually, it's not about the skill level or anything, though. You could have picked any of those Saints players in the back line. You could have had Hugh Jones or Marchant for that unbelievable save of the ball going out and then Hugh Jones scores. But I'm going to go for Courtney Laws. And I love Courtney Laws. He's tough. But anyone who's seen the picture of his thumb that's basically been completely snapped off his hand 2 weeks earlier, and he goes back and plays a full game and plays really, really well. So, you know, bionic man, how he's got back from an open dislocation of the thumb when it's literally hanging by its skin to play like that just shows what a great player he is.
Because I think Phil Dowson said this week, didn't he, that it's a bit like Frankenstein's monster now, Courtney Laws, like his hand everywhere is a bit kind of all stitched up and patched up. So no, he was really good. Do you know what I'm going to go for? This is ridiculous. I'm just going to go for Jamal Ford-Robertson purely for the shock on his face when he scored, lost the final try. That is all I'm basing it on. So I could have gone for a few of the London Irish youngsters. They were good, but yeah, I'm going to go for Jamal. Rachael, let's turn our attention then to the women's game. England sealing another Grand Slam at the Six Nations. You've mentioned the atmosphere, you've mentioned the fans, and you there as a fan, you were working on it. How did you feel watching them?
Oh, it was awesome. I think we've all been anticipating this game, like right from the start of the Six Nations. Everyone was talking about it's going to be England, France in the end, and you know the spectacle didn't disappoint. Early on, France, you know, came out, drew first blood, and all of us are like, okay, we've got a game on now, and it rattled England a little bit, but they didn't, you know, lose their composure or worry at any point, and they weren't behind for that long. And I just think we just showed that England are at a different class and at a different level. And, it was quite simple, their game plan, but they executed it really well. And that's where the difference between the two teams, like France could have won that game, but they crumbled under the pressure. Their line-out didn't function. Their scrum was still competitive, but that was two areas that England actually came out on top against them. Going into that game, France were ahead of them in both their line-out success and their scrum success. So for them to turn it around under so much pressure and deliver at critical moments, they took their opportunities where France didn't. But yeah, and it just silenced the crowd. There were a couple of times that they got revved up again, but England just managed to, silence them, bring the pressure down. I spoke about the Boulard line break and that the entire stadium erupted. Suddenly all the flags were waving again because they'd been put down for quite a while at that point. But yeah, it just didn't disappoint. And I think, England kicked on. It was a tight game. They'd been tested, which they hadn't quite been as much throughout the Six Nations so far. But it's good to see them come out on top. But there are still some questions to be answered, and some England are going to have to find some different ways to attack as well. They can't just rely on their driving more, because that's what won them the game. But overall, the amount of pressure that England are on as well, in terms of the consecutive wins that they're on, going for another Grand Slam, all eyes on them. There's a huge expectation that comes with playing as well as they do and having all the records that they have. And then trying to do that in France, on your own with 90% of the spectators against you. And my word, any referee decision that went against France, you wouldn't want to be the referee in the middle of the pitch that day. But overall, brilliant spectacle. It lived up to everything that we expected. Tight game, good margin between the two. But it's funny, we started talking to some of the players post-game, and obviously they're really proud of the moment. They're going to go and celebrate, which they did, but they're already thinking, we've got a lot of hard graft to do over the summer. We know that everyone's coming. Everybody's obviously seen the best of us, and we've got to go away and work on some other things. So that mindset that they've got to continue to want to drive the standard and be better, and they know they're going to have to be better, because there was a lot of things that didn't go right for them. And it's good that they're a team that are really aware of that and not just going to sit back and think, well, we've dominated Europe, we dominated the summer hemisphere over the autumn, we're in a really good place, let's just keep doing what we're doing. Actually, they want to find new gears.
Because it's difficult, isn't it? Because they're always the hunted. We speak about this quite a lot in the Premiership. How different is it to be the hunters as opposed to the hunted? But they are always the hunted. So it's almost got to be a psychological and a mindset and to keep that strong for them as well, isn't it? Looking ahead to the World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, they know that, well, you just look over at New Zealand, the infrastructure that they now brought in, bringing in Wade Smith, Mike Cron into their coaching setup, Alan Bunton as well to come in. So they know that teams are going to get better and improve. France will know that they could have beaten England at the weekend, and they've got to find something different psychologically over the next 6 months. Even though England have kind of wiped away every team brings their best game to England. They find a new level, they find a new gear, and England have to keep raising their game every time. It's no easy week for them. As much as a result might show you one thing, I'm sure Ben and James will agree, results don't always show what the effort is or how hard you had to work for those opportunities and those tries. But yeah, they know that the World Cup is theirs to lose, but with that comes a lot of added pressure. And they've got to be able to deal with that in a World Cup year. There's a lot of players that haven't played in the World Cup that will be going next year as well. Right. And the new quarterfinals as well now. So there's another stage of knockout rugby. So there are other pressures that are coming onto the England squad other than just kind of focusing just on the rugby. But yeah, I know what Simon Middleton, he knows that he can't rest on his laurels. He knows he's got the best team in the world. He's got the best players, but he also knows that everybody's coming after them, and they'll do everything that they can to upset this English party, the record wins and the success stories that England keep driving out. That everybody will want to destroy that. Of course they will. But England are aware and firmly got their foot on the pedal to go, all right, you're going to come after us, but we're going to keep moving forwards. That gap is still going to stay there.
I love that they're looking at it like that. They scored 282 points in the competition this year, which is unbelievable, Ben.
Oh, huge. And Rachel's point, I think the most important thing for them And it fell really nicely that, the France game was the last one, everything on it. It's a grand slam for both sides. And to be away from home in the sort of atmosphere that you can only really get in France will give them such an important foundation for what's to come at the World Cup, because as Rachel said, everyone guns for them. But not only that, every crowd they play in front of, whether they're playing New Zealand or playing whoever, they will want England to lose, and to have that background of when the pressure's on, we know we can sort of block out all that surrounding noise and make it white noise and just focus on what we need to do is massively important. The pressure as well, had they played at home against France, won quite easily, there'd still be that nagging doubt in the back of your mind. What happens if the game doesn't go our way? What happens if we make a few mistakes? Are we going to be able to, it's fine when things are going well and we're winning by 50 points, but when we get into an arm wrestle, which at some point during a World Cup campaign you're going to, have we got the tools to do it? And 2003, we'd cocked up a couple of Grand Slam opportunities in the years leading up to 2003. And Clive Woodward quite bravely really said to us, if you don't beat Ireland at Lansdowne Road this week, you won't win the World Cup. Simple as that. And put that pressure on us. Now, dread to think what he would have said afterwards had we not won, but you have to sort of go through those steps. And Rachel made the point, sometimes the score doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. That game against Ireland, although we won by a big margin, we played really well, and it was a tough game. And that was probably the single biggest lift we got going into the World Cup.
What I'm enjoying at the moment is I feel like the rugby world are really celebrating this England side, whereas maybe, you guys haven't had, we always talk about this, don't we, really? I know it's boring now, but like you haven't had the recognition, I think, maybe that you deserved over the years. But I think women's rugby in general, this competition, I don't know whether it's having it at a different time to the men's competition. James, you think that's helped? I've really enjoyed the coverage and how much we're celebrating the Women's Six Nations this year.
Yeah, I was sceptical when I first saw it, because we've seen with things like the 100 in the cricket and even double headers in rugby go really well. But actually having its own window, I think there's a commercial angle to it as well. Having its own space, and also time in the press, people talking about it is not drowned out by what's happening in the men's game, so it's really allowing it to flourish. But I do think that for England, Rachel, you talk about wanting them to go to the next level. I think a big part of that is going to be the likes of Ireland, Wales as well, actually, who I think had a good tournament, and I think have announced central contracts as well. Lisa Newman, who was up at Sale, I think has gone back for one of those central contracts. I think that's going to be a big part of it, because I do think whilst the Ireland game, England did play really well, having like lots and lots of games at a higher standard, I think is going to be really important to go on. Everyone can slip up once against France, especially when they're sort of gunning for us up front, etc. But I think, over the course of the next few years, it would be great to see those guys become more competitive.
Let's talk about Wales then, shall we? Will they feel like they've taken a little step back after that weekend, after the defeat this weekend?
I think if they were to look at their campaign as a whole, they'll probably be really pleased with where they've kind of got to. Their first two rounds, winning both of those, and winning them, at the death as well. The one against Scotland right at the end, not giving up, getting a turnover on their line to keep Scotland out, and the way that they bounced back against France. And I think Cunningham's very clear about where they are as a group and what they need to work towards. And I don't think anybody was expecting these miracles from suddenly they're going to be, competitive with the likes of England and France. Although they gave France a really good game, you look at the score and you look at the result and the problems that they caused. I think overall as a campaign, they're going to be really proud of where they are, but it would have 100% highlighted the areas that they have to get right before the Rugby World Cup. And, they've got 6 months to work on that. And for me, I'm really excited to see where Wales go. I think Nigel Walker is, one of the people that stands in front of the camera and says, look, we want to have this. We want to have the best program in the world. It's going to take us time to get there. We know that we've not got things right in the past, but we're making them right now. It's going to get time. Have a bit of patience with us. And I just think when you make statements like that, and he did that last December, and he's followed those up, and then you just see in the difference from players when they hear that your CEO is backing you, and then there's proof in that backing. You get more from a player, you get more from a group, you get the belief because you've got belief coming from outside of that circle. So I think overall they'll be happy, but they'll know that they let that one go this weekend. Just a penalty right at the end. Michaela Sillery, the 13 from Italy, has got the best kicking percentages of the entire competition, so can't afford to be loose in those final plays. So they'll be devastated. They'll be gutted about that result. But I think when they look back as a whole, there'll be plenty that they're pleased with.
Yeah, it definitely feels like we're in a better place, from the outside looking in, for sure. Right, and that Scotland-Ireland game then, that was another nail-biter. Scotland was so close.
Yeah, I feel like for Scotland, I think, if you look at them on paper, they've got some unbelievable talent, like individually in the back line, up front, their pack is brilliant. You've got the likes of Jay Conkle, who plays down at Harlequins, who is a phenomenal player, would make it into any international team. But I don't know whether or not they came into this tournament. They're one of the teams that don't have huge contracts, so their time together is very limited. But prior to all of this, they had all the World Cup qualifiers, which is extremely exhausting physically, mentally, emotionally. The amount of times it was changed, going out to Dubai in the final qualifications. I just think they came into this probably, under pretty overcooked. Around all the work that they've had to put in, the huge climax of qualifying, which they haven't done for so long, and then to try and back that up in a Six Nations campaign very quickly, whilst all these players again work full time. Even if they do have a contract, they're still doing work outside of that. I think it's been a really tough Six Nations for them. They're a better side than what their results have produced. And then Ireland, it's a similar story. They've had so much kind of off-pitch distraction, but again, how do we expect players to consistently perform at a level where they're conflicted with a 7s and a 15s program? They've got players who are all full-time working, and then assembling 2 days before a test match. It's really hard for them. So and you think prior to all the change and the letter to the government and calling the RFU out, that it's been a really tough time for that squad. And I think to end on a win the way that they did as well in the final play, to get the score and then the conversion to win it, hopefully that's the thing to kick them off. But for me, it's a bigger piece for Ireland. They've had all this attention around how poor their program's been, and I know there's now talk of these contracts, but again, they're not coming in until the end of next year. So it's still a tough place for Ireland to be in.
Let's try and, it's difficult, I know, sum up the tournament as a whole then, because we've spoken before on this podcast about the need to level up in the women's game. So looking at positives, what do you think will be the real takeaway stories, takeaway moments from the Six Nations this year?
I think you can't look past what happened at Tigers, and Ben will be pleased about that. But I think having the Six Nations in its own window is completely allowed it to isolate the women and just focus on them. And it wasn't just in England that we had record crowds. Wales also had record crowds, same in Ireland. And I just think, the momentum that is gathered now, especially going into the World Cup, is amazing. And the viewing figures via TV as well that we've had, I think they're probably the big takeaways. The fact that the window is allowed for new fans, old fans, to come back to actually follow the game. And I think what I loved the most was we were at Gloucester and we had a record crowd, and then literally 2 weeks later we then re-break that. So that shows that there is a group of people, fans, that are following the women's game, which may not have been able to do so during the same window as the men. And I think that's probably my biggest takeaway, is that, and I don't know, for years we've been talking about this, especially female players and people who are in it, coaching it or whatever, saying, there's an appetite for the game, people want to watch it, we should be put on a platform that allows us to be who we are, etc. And we're in it, and I think we've talked about it for so long, and now we're finally here. We're in the moment where we can really kick on and really use this sport to grow it completely, not just in the women's game. And so it's just been really proud to see and be a part of it. And I guess the story of Emily as well, getting her 100th cap at where she grew up, just 10 miles down the road at Leicester as well, is another big story. But I think the overall look at how well this Six Nation has gone in terms of fan engagement and eyeballs on the game, it has been remarkable.
So James, time for you to give us a lowdown on your club podcast, The Shark Tank. Am I right saying that you met your co-hosts on Twitter? Was it a kind of sliding into my DMs kind of situation, or did you just agree on certain points?
That's exactly right. Like all relationships these days, you meet online, right? So yeah, we did sort of ranting about whatever relegation battle we're in at the time, probably. And then we sort of arranged to meet for a couple of pints in what was called the Shark Tank then, the marquee at the AJ Bell. And we just hit it off now. And, 4 years on, we're good mates. We live all around the world. Lewis, who started it up, is now over in Australia, actually. So we're keeping that going on. The time difference is something, but I think we were, if we weren't the first fan podcast around, we were like near the front for sure. We're 4 years in now, so we absolutely love it.
The podcast blurb reads as a detailed, irreverent, and occasionally cynical look at all things sales. So my question to you is like, who's the detail? Who's the cynical? Have you all got kind of like parts to play, or do you all just like crack on?
No, they're the hats that we'll probably swap on a daily basis, because we've all got real jobs, right? We're not trying to like be in the media here or become journalists or something. We're just three lads who like talking about sale. And when you're from the Northwest, there isn't a lot of like rugby union media around, to be honest, to sort of devour. It's pretty niche stuff in and amongst all of the rugby league and all of the football around. So, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do it, really. We're kind of fed up of various, journalists and correspondents sort of disappearing from BBC and local media and things like that. So we were like, well, apart from the club, where else can people get any content on sale? So that's why we wanted to start it up, really. And unfortunately, people don't mind the sound of our voices and keep tuning in, which it shocks me. It certainly shocks all my friends. I mean, they might actually listen to this one, but I think they only listen to the Shark Tank if they kind of want to get an early bed.
I love that. Managed to get any players on?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we get players on pretty regularly. I mean, to be fair, the club are massively supportive of us. I think they're aware that there aren't many outlets to sort of about sale in the media, so they're really good at providing players. We've had all sorts over the year. Will Cliff's been on, and our owner as well, Simon Orange, that's got the biggest listenership in and around when the failed move back to sales and building our own stadium there, which didn't work out in the end. But we had a large listenership for that. So just a huge thank you for everybody at Sale Sharks for continuing to support the Shark Tank podcast.
100%. And you've had some entertaining directors of rugby. Steve Diamond, always good value. Have you spoken to him? Have you interviewed him?
Do you know what? We never did, Steve. And I don't think Alex Anderson really understands podcasts. He seems so modern in so many ways, but I think podcasts for him, apparently it's not his thing. But we will get him on. He has spoken to us at the barbecue and said he'll come on. So we'll get him on before pre-season. We never had Dimes, which is just gutting. Like, such a legend.
Yeah, I love talking to Steve Diamond. You, Benny, like genuinely, you just don't know what's going to come out.
I love it when you speak to him and we're watching and we're just hoping that you cock up and say something you shouldn't. And
oh, that's nice to know. Thanks, Benny.
No, he is always good value. And what's always good, like, he's got a look on his face where he's just about to throw a hand grenade in before the end of the interview.
Yeah, he always does that
we can pick up on, and then we're all excited. Yeah.
So you mentioned you'd like to get Alex on. Like, I think Alex would be great on. He's so good. Anyone else you'd like to go on the podcast?
Yeah, well, we're always really interested. Like, the club are investing a lot in their academy. Obviously, big catchment area in the Northwest. So we'd love to get someone like Neil Briggs on, who's involved in the academy. Fergus Mulcrane as well, who's been playing down at Sale FC. And the other thing that we'd really love to do is do like a live event. We'd love to like get a clubhouse somewhere in the Northwest, maybe over at Coldy, now that they've just been promoted to the Championship. That'll be a fantastic place to go and do a season preview or something like that.
What's this I hear about you getting roped into doing some modelling gigs for the club, James?
Oh, well, I mean, as you can see, I think it's been recorded. I don't think we've been chosen particularly for our looks, but again, this is just the club. Maybe the marketing budget's been like cut or something, because we got a little shout out just to say, okay, come along and model the new shirts for the year. So with like photos, videos, marketing promos on the website. I mean, no wonder sales are down this year.
Have you ever done any rugby modelling, Ben Kay? I'm sure you have in your day.
Well, just being told to wear the shirt and stand in front of a camera, yeah, funnily enough. Oh, I know where this is going. Go on, Sarra, tell us about your modelling career. Oh my God. Oh.
I just imagine you being really awkward, Ben.
What? What?
I just imagine you being really awkward in a photo shoot, that's all. They don't get on board with my Instagram pictures, James, at all on site, which I think is wrong. They just hate me getting my camera phone, oh my God, wow, am I 80? They hate me getting my phone out. No. They hate me getting my phone out to take pictures.
It's so heavy because your knee always seems to drop just after you get it out. I don't know what that is.
It's a good
every time you're on this podcast, it always comes something about your previous cacareer, like bands that you've been in, modelling career.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up again. Anyway, very quickly running out of time, so let's move on. Okay, so those of you who listen regularly will know that we try to impart a bit of rugby trivia into the podcast with our game Over the Line or In the Bin. Rachel, it's on you this week. You're the quiz master. What have you got for us?
Yes, thanks, Sarra. So this little quiz for you is you have to just make a decision whether it's over the line, which means that it's true, or it's in the bin, it means that it's false. So Jess Breach, Zoe Harrison, Ellie Kildan and Hannah Bottoman, who are all part of the Grand Slam win this weekend, they all made their test debut for England on the 25th of November in 2017 against Canada. Now, to mark this occasion of their first international cap, all the girls said, right, let's get matching tattoos with the date. So is that over the line or in the bin? Start with you, Ben.
Oh, go on, Ben, you go.
Oh, just because I want it to be true. Over the line.
Sarra?
I'm going to say over the line as well.
I'm going to go in the bin then, just to differentiate myself.
Well, James, you are correct, because it's actually in the bin. So according to Jess Breach, they all shook on this before the game and said, right, we're going to go get the tattoos done, have the agreement. But she's the only one who went ahead and got the rose and the date tattooed onto her body. Onto her body.
I mean body.
Body.
Brilliant. We'll take being wrong because that's a good story. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks for your time. I know you've got to get back to training now. Really appreciate your time today. Cheers. Lovely to talk to you.
And to you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers, Rachel. Bye.
Cheers.
So another couple of weeks to wait then until the next round of the Premiership. There's more European rugby. We've already spoken a little bit about it. We're very excited about it on BT. Ben, so many matchups to get excited about. None more so than Leicester-Leinster on Saturday. How do you see that playing out?
No idea, because it is just Leicester are usually, I'd say, Leinster with how they're playing, everything behind them. But just there's so much momentum behind Leicester at the moment. If it was over in Dublin, I'd be less confident. I still think Leinster are favourites, but it is just the dream fixture, I think, for so many people to watch. An informed Leicester against the might of Leinster. Probably not a dream for Nick Mullins, will be commentating. Is Nick Mullins commentating? I don't know. Whoever's doing the lead commentary and any presenters, but yeah, it's going to be an absolute corker. As I said, Leinster are favourites, so I'll have to sort of back them. But I've got a sneaky feeling that it won't be quite as easy as some people think.
No, it's going to be good. And James, we've touched upon it already, but how are you feeling about Sale's chances against Racing? Ben and I are going there. We're really excited. Our French will be on point as ever. But it's going to be good, isn't it?
It's going to be great. We've got a couple of players that we rested at the weekend, like Lud and Manu, who hopefully be completely fresh. I think it's going to be a tough gig. Racing, you look at their team, it's just absolutely outrageous. So I think if we can go there and be in the game after 50, 60 minutes and get the crowd a bit itchy, then that's our best chance.
How do you think that'll go, Ben?
Look, you'd expect Racing to, with everything being at home, you'd expect them to front up. So I'll say that, but Sale could play a type of game that they don't like, Racing don't like, and just start getting frustrated, and then you sort of all that stuff we were talking about before with French crowds, and that they can turn on their own team a little bit. I think everyone turning up with a French accent, apart from you putting one on Sunday, will be expecting this sort of procession and glamour rugby to be played, but it won't be that.
My French accent is amazing. Merci. Thank you.
Bordeaux. Say Bordeaux, sir.
Bordeaux.
Oh, that's pretty good. That was pretty good.
Listen to me now, right? How would you say? So if I say Bordeaux like a Welsh person, it would be Bordeaux. But then if I try and say it like you guys, I sound like, I don't know, like someone from Only Fools of Horses, because I go Bordeaux. Like, so I can't win, really. I prefer the Welsh way of going Bordeaux. Anyway, on that note, that is all for this episode. A big thank you to Rachel, of course, James Madeley and Ben Kay. Thank you, gents. It's been a pleasure. Lawrence and the podcast will be back in a few weeks' time, ready to cover all the results from round 25 of the Premiership. In the meantime, thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.